Boo! Yes, it's the final week of October, which means we have the World Series, college football, the NFL, NHL action, the NBA, UFC, soccer, and let's not forget about that college basketball right around the corner. Since we're almost obliged to have a Halloween commercial, let's make it a scary good one. Until midnight on October 31st, no costume is required to get a 31% discount on one all-access package of your choice at both WagerTalk and Sports Memo using coupon code BOO31 at checkout. This coupon will save you over $12 on a one-day all-access that includes any 5% plays. And it'll also save you over $18 off the 3-day all-access. Or why not go big and save over $90 off a 30-day all-access? Or perhaps take over business for the next year by saving over $600 with a 12-month all-access package, coming out to just $3.77 per day for the next 365 days. Coupon code BOO31 expires at midnight on Halloween. But remember to use it wisely, as this coupon can only be used once at WagerTalk and once at Sports Memo. From my friend and I, happy Halloween.
Welcome into the World Series betting preview show. I am Drew Martin, joined by Brian Leonard and Steve Merrill of WagerTalk.com, as we're getting a first look here at this World Series for 2022, seeing the Houston Astros about minus 190 series favorites. We got plus 165 on the Phillies. Going around the horn here, Brian Leonard. Check him out, WagerTalk.com. Brian, happy Thursday to you, man. Welcome in.
I appreciate it. Nice to be able to talk baseball again. There's been a little bit of a break, but what I do like is they'll be playing 4 games in 5 days. So I like that. Too many breaks in the playoffs, too many breaks in the NBA playoffs as well, in my regard. But yeah, it's they've had a little bit of a break going into the World Series, but it should be over pretty quickly.
Yeah, that is true. I'm surprised that they kind of pushed it back to Friday, but to your point, Brian, it's good to get these games off and rolling this weekend, Friday night on Fox Deportes, ESPN Radio as well. How you can catch the World Series here. We got Steve Merrill at Steve Merrill on Twitter. Welcome in, Steve.
Yeah, Drew, it's been kind of a strange playoffs for me. I feel like I've watched less of this playoffs than ever because the games were over so fast and they were all kind of meaningless. You know, like that Yankees-Houston series was almost over before it started. It was such a tough situation for the Yankees, not only, you know, having to go 5 games, but then getting rained out and having to play the day before they had to start the ALCS and travel. And they just never really had their pitching lined up like it should. And the offense, of course, was ice cold. Houston had the preferred rest situation, but now, you know, both teams for this series are going to have everyone lined up like they want, because the Phillies took care of business pretty fast as well against the Padres. So it's almost been like a week without baseball. It's been kind of a disappointing postseason in regards to that. There really haven't been many, you know, high-profile games, 6s and 7s, things like that. So hopefully this World Series is a little more competitive, and I think it's a pretty good matchup overall.
Yeah, guys, with the break, actually, I guess you could make the argument, you know, Wheeler going in game 2 might be the only thing that might have been pushed back. I mean, going on a full 5 days rest for the Phillies starter, projected starter in game 2. We get game 1 here, projected starters, Aaron Nola and Justin Verlander. A couple stats before we throw it around. Houston, to Steve's point, the 3rd team to advance to the World Series, not losing a game in the postseason, joining the 2007 Colorado Rockies and the 2014 Kansas City Royals, who didn't suffer a loss until the World Series in those years. And of course, the Houston Astros making it here, 7-0 in their postseason so far, sweeping the Mariners and sweeping the Yankees. Actually, interestingly enough, Brian, as we start breaking down, you know, this series overall, game 1, we are seeing Nola and Verlander. The Houston Astros' last loss came on October 3rd, interestingly enough, to the Philadelphia Phillies here. And that was Aaron Nola on the hill, pitching 6.2 scoreless innings in that one. The Phillies won, I believe, 3-0 in that game. So they've gone literally almost the whole month of October without losing a game here. I mean, now granted, there are breaks in between there, Brian, but I mean, unless you're kind of betting on rust or maybe this Phillies offense catching fire, plus the fact their first two pitchers, which is more than just, Nola and Wheeler kind of going out and really dealing against this Astros offense. Really tough to step in front of them right now. In my opinion here, Brian, we are seeing the series price minus 190, very reflective of this Astros team and their dominance. Of course, if you're new to sports betting, guys, you got to risk $190 to win $100 for the Astros to win the World Series, where you get plus 165 back on the Phillies to win the World Series. That means you got to risk 100 to win 165. So you get that nice big plus price. But of course, the Phillies going off as the underdog. Brian, what are your overall thoughts here looking at the series? Do you think that price is about right in the series price?
Before we talk about the series, I wanted to touch on scheduling, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, how they gave them the first few days off here to get everything set up. What would have happened if the schedule makers had made the games after Cleveland goes up 2-1 over the Yankees? They go back, they play one game in New York, took a day off. We're supposed to play the next game in New York. Well, obviously, a lot of rainouts there. Everybody moving back, everything's going back and forth from the pitching standpoint. What would have happened if they would have just played what makes sense and just played the first two games back to back in New York? Whereas New York wins game 4, and then the next day they play again. It hurt Cleveland in that regard, but it seemed to have hurt the Yankees in that regard as well. You talked about them having to push everything back because of all these schedule changes with the rainouts and everything. We may have had different people playing in this series if that they'd scheduled it back-to-back games instead of, for some reason, giving them that extra day off in New York. So it's interesting how that works out. But you have to have, when you're looking at the World Series, I always, it's not the olden days where the leagues didn't play each other. American League and National League for a long time didn't play. Now they have interleague games, and you even talked about these two teams just playing recently. But you have to take a look at the relative strengths of these conferences. In the American League, it was more balanced on the season. We all thought that the Dodgers, and they proved it, the Dodgers aren't in this series, but they were the best regular season team this year by far. But when you take a look at what the leagues have done, in the American League, there's only one team in the American League with a below 40% win percentage. That's the Oakland A's. In the National League, there's 3 of them. National League was weaker on the season. Other than the Dodgers, who dominated, there really was a coin flip for everybody else. In the American League, yes, the Yankees got off to that great start and they faded, but Houston was strong all season long. And I do a lot of looking at what teams do against winning teams. Now, granted, this is all regular season. You talked about how well Philadelphia's done in the playoffs, but you take a look at what Houston did during the regular season against winning teams. 42-27. Philadelphia 34-47. So they haven't done quite as well against winning teams, and now they're going against the best team that they played. Because if you remember, San Diego was the team that knocked out the LA Dodgers. So Philadelphia had that big advantage. Thank you, San Diego Padres in that regard. But Houston, to me, is the deeper team. Houston's the experienced team, and I'm not going to say that Philadelphia is just happy to be there, but you see that a lot for a team who hasn't been there for a long time. They get to that point and they go, "Well, this is great. They're playing on playing on free money." Whereas Houston's goal coming into the season was to not only get to the World Series, but to win the World Series. They've got a lot of veterans who've been there before. The only way I can look at this series is to take a look at Houston. And when you take a look, I read this in the Las Vegas newspaper today. On the regular season, Houston won 19 more games than Philadelphia did. That's only the second biggest differential in the history of baseball between the two leagues. There was one year where one team had 23 more wins. So that tells you the differential here between this Houston Astros team on the season, plus 219 run differential, playing in the stronger league. Philadelphia plus 62, playing in the lesser league. So I like Houston here. Houston's, to me, a bargain at less than $2 to win it all, and I also prefer them in Game 1.
Okay, and Steve, what's your opinion here? The minus 190, do you think it's a bargain as well, or you actually think this plus 165 on the Phillies might be worth a look?
I think it's probably pretty much where it should be because that's a big split. That's a 25-cent split. I'll kind of hedge and say I'll Swiss miss, as we say in the NBA show, say the line's probably 175, 180, right? So the reason I say that is because I think Houston, like Brian says, definitely more than a 2-1 favorite on the season. But the Dodgers were that as well against the Padres or anybody else they would have played. And we saw that turned out because these are short series. Over 162 games, the best teams are going to pull ahead. The Dodgers had deep offense, a very deep pitching staff. The thing is, though, in these best of 7, it was best of 5, even best of 3 in the wild card round. Short term, more randomness can happen. Underdogs can pull upsets, and especially in a sport like baseball, where the pitcher can dominate a certain game, or in hockey, where a goaltender can dominate a game. And that's why we see less upsets in the NBA playoffs, a 5 or 7 game series, than we do in hockey or especially baseball. Year in and year out, the best team does not win the World Series. That was obviously the case this year because the Dodgers were by far the best team. I would agree with Brian that the Astros have been the second best team this year. They should have the edge in a 7-game series. But I want to get back to the Wheeler-Nola switch because I do think they wanted to give Wheeler the extra day of rest. And by the way, 4 versus 5 is decent. The real thing you want to watch out for is when a guy's on 3 days rest. That's when historically pitchers don't do well. 4 days rest, they can often do well. 5, that's preferred. But I think the other thing the Astros are trying to do here, if you look at the matchup, is Verlander's going in game 1, likely Cy Young winner. Valdez is going in game 2 on Saturday. So maybe concede that Verlander's going to beat you in game 1. Let's bring Wheeler, who has better numbers than Nola this year, who's been their best pitcher. Let's try to win game 2 on the road. And keep in mind, they go back for 3 straight. This isn't a 2-2-1-1-1 like in basketball and hockey. It's a 2-3-2. And the Phillies did have a much stronger home field advantage this year. In fact, their home road dichotomy was pretty extreme. On the season, they were 13 games above 500 at home. They were 1 below on the road. That's a net difference of 14 games. Astros, meanwhile, only had a net difference of 4 games home and away. They were a very good a road team, very good at home. So the Phillies are going to have a raucous atmosphere at home, more so than Houston will have, because Houston's used to being in the World Series. Their fans are a little spoiled, I think. Philly can't wait. So I think the Phillies are trying to split games 1 and 2, which means if you're looking at the series play, Drew, instead of taking plus 165, you might want to wait and play it after game 1, assuming Verlander gets the win as the favorite, because then you've got Wheeler going against Valdez. And the other thing I'll point out about game 2, Valdez is a lefty. The Phillies had a pretty extreme record this year versus righties and lefties. If you look at just their 1 loss against starters, they were 2 games above 500 against righties, 59 and 57. 10 games above against lefties, 28 and 18. So I really feel like the Phillies are setting up to try to win game 2 here and go back home with the series tied 1-1. If that's the case, Phillies are alive in this one, even though they're not the better team overall.
Steve, love the breakdown, man. And just seeing the total of 6.5. Let's just say this does finish 4-2. Houston wins game 1. What do you think that price would be on the series going into game 2 if the situation you're kind of explaining actually comes to fruition? Would it be that much more of a big plus price? Like, what are you thinking you would get on the Phillies plus price wise?
Yeah, I'm curious to get Brian's take on this also. Brian, right now it's minus 190. Say take back plus 165. It'll definitely be more than 2-1. Do we dare say plus 250? I'm looking for an advanced line on game 2. I don't think the Phillies would be favored in game 2, but it's going to be a lot lower than the $1.60, $1.65 with Wheeler versus Valdez. So I'll say 230 plus 250 maybe. So you're getting 60% more than you're getting right now. I mean, Brian, what do you think the adjustment would be?
Well, if Houston's a 190 right now, that's a pretty good tell that they're the better team. If they lose this game, I don't know.
Minus
I haven't
300
really given
Houston
it much
if they
thought.
win.
Yeah, but Houston, how big of a favorite is Philadelphia going to be in Philadelphia?
I don't know that they will be a favorite. Will they?
Yeah, be pick them maybe at best. Yeah.
You're still getting the team who may be favored or at least favored in 3 of the final 7 games, significant favorites, and probably closer to a pick 'em in the other games. So I don't know if it'll move that much here. And when you move, Drew, you talked about them and being the best pitcher that they have, Wheeler, going right now. When you do move him back to number 2, that means when you're playing these games so close together that, he won't be back until later on in the season or later on in the series. So if Houston takes a quick 3-0 lead, we may never see him again in this series. So that's the one drawback by doing that to him. But both teams have quality. I mean, there's Suarez and Falter, decent starters. Houston's got guys that are probably a little bit better experienced, a little bit better starters. One thing I'm interested in this series, and Steve talked about lefty-righty. Houston does not have any lefties in the entire bullpen. They haven't had lefties in the bullpen. That just means the right-handers were able to get out both lefties and righties together. With that situation where they got to come in and pitch three guys or pitch to three different batters or the end of the inning, that seems to be a benefit for Houston, having those pitchers that they don't have to switch a lefty-righty type of thing. I think that'll help them in this series also.
That's a great point, Brian. Guys, we do need to point out here, before we go around the horn here with final thoughts, Houston bullpen in the postseason, Brian, to your point, just 3 runs given up in 33 innings, all 3 runs off a solo shot. So they have been dominant, under a 1 ERA. Talking about the Houston Astros bullpen here, guys. I didn't know, I didn't realize that, Brian. All righties. So yeah, that lefty-righty potential there. I'm guessing good changeups out of the pen, pointing towards Houston late inning advantage possibly. Did want to point out a couple other points before we get Brian and Steve's final thoughts here on the series. Also game 1 as well, guys, if you want to throw it out there. Dusty Baker, 73 years old, something I read here. He'll be the oldest manager to coach in the to manage in the World Series in baseball history, passing Jack McKeon from 03 in the Florida Marlins, 72 years old. Something to watch there. A couple points on the postseason coming in that might carry over into the World Series. Team to score first is 23-11 so far in this postseason. So getting out to the lead has mattered, resting on the bullpens. Team to out home run their opponents, 20-5 in the postseason. So if you're hitting more home runs, you are 20-5 so far in the postseason. 46% of the runs via home run in this postseason. That's compared to the regular season, just 39%. And I think there's a reason to that. We're getting better pitchers in the postseason. Therefore, I think guys are going in with the mentality, hey, the odds of us getting 3 hits in a row aren't that good. Let's try to get a guy on and swing for the fences. I think we're actually seeing that come, in reality this postseason. So something to watch there, guys, in terms of guys swinging for the fences and who can out home run and also who can score first in this World Series. So far has had a big impact on wins and losses this postseason. But going around the horn here, guys, great breakdowns overall. The analysis from Brian Leonard and Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com. Check them out. Their World Series packages discounted as well right now at WagerTalk. You can get the full World Series, all selections. The promo is just $49, so no need to buy just one play there. $49, and you will get the whole series in the World Series from Brian Leonard, Steve Merrill. I am Drew Martin, all available at WagerTalk.com. So Brian Leonard, great baseball mind, also knows the NBA, college football, NFL. Been doing it successfully for a long time there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Brian, any final thoughts here? If you got a game 1 look, anything else you wanted to kind of throw out there to the watchers before we shut this down with the World Series?
Yeah, when it comes to the World Series, I think I've talked pretty extensively how I like Houston in this. I like them better in the long run, obviously, than I do in the short run. Anything can happen anything can happen anyway, but in the shorter run, you have more of a chance for the underdog in that regard. But I do want to talk about the pitching advantages that Houston, I believe, has in this series. I'm a big proponent of Fangraphs. They do terrific jobs over there. If you take a look at roster research, which I've subscribed to for years before they even teamed up with Fangraphs, they call it a power rank for the pitchers. And these are what they rank the pitchers for the entire Major League Baseball, starters and relievers. They got Justin Verlander, your number 1 starter, ranked 3rd. Framber Valdez, the number 7 starter, is their second guy. So these are guys that you're expecting, if it does go the 7 games, you've got the number 3 and the number 7 starter coming out of this Houston team. But when you take a look at the bullpen, they've got Ryan Presley, number 10, Rafael Montero, number 13, Hector Neris, number 28. So they've got 3 of the top 30 bullpen guys, as well as 2 of the top 10 starters. Philadelphia's got obviously some good pitchers too. Nola and Wheeler are very good. but they don't have the bullpen quite as strong as what Houston has. Houston's gone back and forth this year. The bullpen's been great. The bullpen's been okay. But you go back last few years, they've done a tremendous job in the bullpen. I think Philadelphia's got to have some home run luck in this series in order to advance. You talked about that a bit. The Yankees were that way coming into the playoffs. The Blue Jays were that way coming into the playoffs. They're both gone. Philadelphia is really the only team right now that relies so much on the long ball. Houston's a team that can beat you in many ways. So I like Houston in the series. That's my best bet here. Game 1, leading Houston. Haven't made a decision on that yet.
Brian Leonard. We got Steve Merrill as well. Guys, check him out, WagerTalk.com. Again, the promo, $49 for the whole series, the whole World Series. Steve Merrill on Twitter, at Steve Merrill, 2 R's, 1 L. Steve, final thoughts. If you got a best bet, throw it out, man.
Yeah, a few things. Brian brings up a good point about the bullpens, because if you look at just the numbers for the season, Houston has a substantial edge with the bullpen numbers. I mean, all games, 2.66 ERA. And the Phillies, meanwhile, a 4.17 whip was much better too, 1.12 versus 1.37. So the Astros have the edge. And as he said, a lot of right-handed relievers. That's such great information, because the Phillies, as I said earlier, have been better against left-handers this year. Overall, just from an OPS, on-base plus sluggage. As far as overall offense, 7th and 8th, Houston and Philly almost identical on OPS this year in all games, home and away. So the pitching edge is where Houston has the edge. Starting pitcher and especially the bullpen, that might be the difference in the series. Wanted to point out the MVP odds real quick on the way out here. Very interesting situation. We've got Houston is almost a 2-1 favorite, and as Brian and I both discussed, definitely the better overall team. Yet look at the MVP odds. Bryce Harper is the 5-1 favorite. So you have a situation where the underdog for the series has the MVP favorite. So if you do like the Phillies, instead of playing plus 165, I would sprinkle a little bit on 5-1 on the MVP odds there, as it's hard to imagine them winning the series without Harper doing something. Although I also think Wheeler's going to have to do something if they win the series, and you get him at 20-1. Zach Wheeler, who once again has been moved back to game 2. He avoids Verlander now in game 1. So, Wheeler probably has to win both of his starts in order for the Phillies to win. So 20-1 there. But the main guy I want to point out is Justin Verlander. He's 14-1. He's only 7th on the MVP list. Yet he's the likely Cy Young winner. He's the number 1 starter, which means he'll go in game 5 most likely. We're going to definitely get 2 starts out of him unless they sweep. So there again, if you like the Astros to win the series, maybe a little sprinkle on Verlander at 14-1. My only concern with Verlander is the Kershaw factor. This guy's been dominant all season, but he's old, and he did have a terrible outing in the first playoff game against Seattle when he gave up 10 hits, 6 runs in just 4 innings. He did bounce back, though, against the Yankees with 6 innings and 11 strikeouts and 1 earned run, just 3 hits. So I think he still has his A game, and at 14-1, Verlander might be worth a sprinkle on the MVP odds.
Steve, I got a follow-up for you. Like, pitching-wise for MVP, do you know what like the outcome could be? And also, yeah, this is a great stat here. World Series statistics, Justin Verlander, he is 0-6 in his 7 starts in the World Series. If you're looking for kind of a little nugget there to go on the big underdog Philadelphia Phillies in game 1, that might be something. He has kind of struggled under the lights in the World Series. But Steve, do you have anything on that in terms of pitchers winning the MVP?
Yeah, if you just look at recent years here, we had, a right field designated hitter win, Seager a shortstop winner, Strasburg won as a starting pitcher. But if you look back over the last 7 years, we've only had Strasburg win. You have to go back to 2014, Madison Bumgarner. So that is why Wheeler and Verlander are like 7th and 11th on that list. Because you just think about it, Drew. You at best, you only get 2 outings. You only get 2 games to win the MVP, right? And you probably have to win both of those starts. So you're probably better off just almost doing a parlay, in the 2 games with those pitchers on the mound and hope they win. And that's why, those are big payoffs. And I would recommend a sprinkle or a little bit of a hedge versus a series play. But I thought it was very interesting that Bryce Harper was favored to win the MVP when they're, almost a 2-1 dog to win the series. It's something we don't see happen too often. And we've only seen it once, I believe, ever in the Super Bowl where the losing teams won the MVP. And it doesn't happen much in baseball either. Yeah,
interesting stat there, Steve. Go ahead, Brian.
You can see that the batters are going to get at least 4 games. It could be, who knows, if it ends up a sweep either way, I don't see any pitcher winning it because they're going to have 1 start. So another problem with Verlander is we all know he's the odds-on favorite to win the Cy Young. This is a situation where they're going to vote for the MVP. Do you vote for the same guy who's about to win the Cy Young, or do you give it to somebody else? So I would not want to bet on Verlander to win the MVP. Like I said, it could be that they sweep and no starter from either team will win, or if he does come down to that, it's a guy who's going to get a postseason reward anyway, so they might give it to somebody else.
Yeah, and Drew, real quick on that, since position players are more likely to win it, you're looking at Alvarez 6.5 to 1, Pena 9 to 1. You know, if you're looking for some Houston players, you are getting some value there due to the fact they're likely to win the series, but Harper is the favorite in the MVP. And since 1955, only one time has the losing team won the MVP in World Series history, back in 1960. And I didn't even know this. Bobby Richardson for the Yankees in 1960 when Brian Leonard was in high school. Watching that game.
I was not even born yet. I just want to point that out.
I knew that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking to myself, like, Zach Wheeler to win it. I would have liked it more if it was game one, because then he would have an outside shot at going game one, game four, game seven. With him being pushed back to game two, there's almost no chance of that, right?
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, guys. I mean, because pitchers have gone 3 times in the World Series. I believe, like Pedro Martinez. I believe Josh Beckett did it for the Marlins. Not sure that it happens a lot, but just kind of going over possibilities here. Not sure if you guys...
You know, I'm looking at Strasburg. When Strasburg won in 19, he was 2-0 over 2 games, gave up 4 earned runs in 14 innings. And then when Bumgarner won it in 14, 2-0, and he had a save. If I recall, he maybe came in the final game and got the save. So those 2 guys only had 2 starts, and they both won it. But obviously, you got to have shutdowns. I mean, he gave up 1 earned run, 21 innings, 17 strikeouts. So you really have to think they're going to have their A game. And I agree with you guys with Verlander. You know, I brought it up as a sprinkle because great stat, Drew, about him in the World Series. I mean, he has not performed well. It's kind of the Kershaw factor.
Well, if they do get to the point where Houston's got a 3-0 lead in the series, now who knows what's going to happen? But if they do have a 3-0 lead in the series, they likely will not pitch Verlander in the next game because they've got plenty of room. And you talked about how his last few starts haven't been as good as what he's been, and because if he's in that situation, they probably likely won't pitch him in Game 4. So that's another reason I don't think that Verlander is worth it.
Like it, guys. Great discussion there. Prop wise, too. Sides, totals, series prices from Brian Leonard, Steve Merrill. I am Drew Martin. Guys, we will actually be back tomorrow, too, breaking down game 1 more in depth, 1:45 Eastern time, right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. So remember that promo, $49 for the whole World Series. Big college football and NFL weekend as well. NHL, NBA, all going on. So make sure to check out WagerTalk.com. Feel free to reply below, guys, where you agree, where you disagree. All is welcome. What you are looking to bet in the World Series as well. And your thoughts here on maybe an MVP future as well. A little sprinkle on a plus price. So check out Brian Leonard, Steve Merrill. I am Drew Martin. Thanks for tuning in. Please smash that like button. Cash those tickets.
Boo! Yes, it's the final week of October, which means we have the World Series, college football, the NFL, NHL action, the NBA, UFC, soccer, and let's not forget about that college basketball right around the corner. Since we're almost obliged to have a Halloween commercial, let's make it a scary good one. Until midnight on October 31st, no costume is required to get a 31% discount on one all-access package of your choice at both WagerTalk and Sports Memo using coupon code BOO31 at checkout. This coupon will save you over $12 on a one-day all-access that includes any 5% plays. And it'll also save you over $18 off the 3-day all-access. Or why not go big and save over $90 off the 30-day all-access? Or perhaps take over business for the next year by saving over $600 with a 12-month all-access package, coming out to just $3.77 per day for the next 365 days. Coupon code BOO31 expires at midnight on Halloween. But remember to use it wisely, as this coupon can only be used once at WagerTalk and once at Sports Memo. From my friend and I, happy Halloween.